Welcome back. I know that some of you already play correspondence or daily games online. Depending on which site you're on, they're called different things, but this video is for the rest of you. If you haven't yet considered playing correspondence or daily games, let me give you a few reasons why. But first, if you're wondering what in the world are correspondence or daily games, well, they're the modern equivalent of actual correspondence games, where two people in remote locations, I don't mean remote like on top of a mountain or a deserted island, but remote from each other, could play chess before the invention of the internet or the telephone. One person would write down their move on a piece of paper or tell it to a courier and have that message sent to the other person, who would then make that move on their physical board, take their time to consider their response, and then send their move back to the first person, who would make that move on their physical board. And depending on how long it took for these messages to go back and forth, sometimes those games took months or even years. Of course, once the telephone was invented, people could play that sort of game in a matter of minutes or hours just using the telephone, telling each other what move they wanted to make, and each person would make the move on the physical board in their own location. And of course, once the internet was invented, you could play chess in two different locations online in a matter of minutes. But Chess.com has what it calls daily games, where you have up to a day to make a move, or you can set it for even longer. And on Lichess.org, that's called Correspondence Chess. So some of you might be asking, if we can now play live games against one another on the internet from two different locations and play those games in a matter of minutes, why would you want to play the daily or correspondence games that could take weeks or even months to complete? I have a couple of reasons, and they almost seem like opposites at first. One is that sometimes I want to take more than a few seconds to consider my next move. And two is that I sometimes don't have enough time to sit down and play the kind of game where I can take minutes on every move. You could select longer time controls on both Chess.com or Lichess and play a 20-minute game or a 40-minute game or even a 90-minute game. But what if you only have 10 minutes? Then you're stuck playing a 5-minute blitz game or a 3+2 blitz game, and then you don't have time to consider every move. But correspondence and daily chess solves both of those problems. When you open the app or go to the website, you can see if one of your opponents in any of your daily or correspondence games has made their move. Then you can open that game. You can take a few minutes to consider what your next move is going to be. You can make that move, or you can choose to wait till later if you're not sure, because you have at least 24 hours, depending on which time control you set, to make each move. And then your opponent has that same amount of time to make their next move. So to me, it solves the time problem. So for people who are in school or have jobs, or in my case, who's a parent, and if you set yourself up for a long time control game, like a 90-minute game, or even 30 minutes per player, sometimes about 5 or 10 minutes into that game, a child comes up to you and says, "Daddy, I need some help," or "My sister's hitting me," or something like that, and you don't have time to finish out that long game. But with the daily or correspondence game, you can. Now, another reason you might want to play it, and I'll get into that in just a minute when we switch over to the game board, is that you're allowed to use opening books. So if you're trying to study an opening, let's say you're trying to study the Queen's Gambit or the Carol Con, in a daily game, you can open the opening database right there on the website, or in the app if that's how you're playing, and see what the Grandmaster would have played next. And you can make that move without your opponent seeing it, and then see what they would respond with, or what their choices of responses are. Then you can take that move back and try a different one and see what their responses are in the opening book. Now, I have heard of websites where people play correspondence chess and they're allowed to use engines like Stockfish or Komodo or whatever. On Chess.com and Lichess, you are not allowed to cheat and use engines. I assume they have ways of detecting those, but you are allowed to use opening books to study openings. Now, once you get out of book moves, then of course you're on your own. But anyway, let me switch over to the other screen and I'll show you how to play them if you're curious. This is my homepage on Chess.com. Yours might look a little different because it'll have a different background, but here on the front page of the website, it lists the daily games that I already have ongoing, and you can click the More button just underneath those and show all the games. Right now I only have 6. I let my number drop to this amount in order so I could add some for the purposes of this video. The 2 that are highlighted are 2 in which my opponents have made moves and they're waiting on me to move in return. So you can just click the square there and consider it and make your move. But I'm going to show you how to start a new one. Just as with any time control on the website, you would go to play and click the play option over here at the left, and where you would normally select a 1-minute bullet game or a 3+2 blitz game or a 10-minute rapid game, down at the bottom, there are choices for daily games. Now I'm going to move the board over so you can see what's behind my camera view. You'll see at the bottom of the list of choices, there's 1 day, there's also 3 days, there's 7 days, and if you click more time controls, you also have the option of 2 days, 5 days, and 14 days. Over on Lichess, there's a slider. You can pick any number of days from 1 to 14, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But here on Chess.com, you pick the one that you want. I usually pick 3 days. That way, if my opponent has other obligations and they can't get back every single day to make a move, they'll still be able to play without defaulting on time. So let's choose 3 days, and then you still have the other options to choose whether it's a random opponent or a friend. You can choose your rating range just as you would for any other time control. But unlike the other time controls, here you have a choice of what kind of opponent you want. Now, there are people who play daily and correspondence games who almost always wait until the last minute or the last hour to make their next move. And if that gets frustrating, you can choose players whose average move time is 3 hours or 6 hours or 12 hours. I usually don't bother with that because it doesn't bother me if my opponent takes their full time to make their move. That is, after all, what we agreed to. Now, I don't take that long to make a move, but I'm okay if they do. So I usually leave that option selected as any. You can also choose minimum games played. Now, I do like to bump this up to 5 or 10 games. That way I'm not dealing with somebody whose rating is still at the default, whereas they might be rated much higher than me in Blitz or Rapid, but look like they're rated lower than me in Daily, and I get blown out of the water. So I want somebody who has played at least a few games so that their rating is somewhat established. You can also select Avoid Timeouts. That way, if you fail to make your move, it'll automatically put you on vacation. Now, that's not an option on the other site, but on Chess.com it is. I don't know how many days of vacation you get. I know that you accrue them over time. You'd have to check the frequently asked questions section or the forums to find out how many days of vacation you get, because I don't ever use that option. There's also an option to play premium members only. That may be only an option for paid members like myself, but I don't ever select that because there's a much wider range of opponents if I also am paired with non-paying members. But anyway, once you've selected all the options that you want, you just click play. And when I click it, there'll be a little box that pops up at the top of the screen. But first, I'm going to move the screen back over so you can see it. Okay, now I am going to click the play button, and you'll see the green box pop up at the top of the screen that says New Open Challenge created. Your game will start when we find a match. And then that box goes away, and sometimes a match is found almost immediately, but other times it takes a little while, depending on what your rating is and how restrictive of an option set you've chosen. Now, for games that are already underway, you can see over here on the menu on the upper left next to the play, there is a little number 2, and when you hover over that, it pops out this side menu, and it shows the 2 games that are waiting for you to move. I can just click on one of those, and it'll bring that game right up. Now, in this game, my opponent has just played d5, and now it's my turn. I can choose to make a move now, or I can wait. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can use opening books in these daily and correspondence games, and the way that you do that is up on the upper right above the move list, there is a choice called Openings, and if you click on that, it'll show you the list of master games. However, for this one, it says there are no games with this position found in the database. So I'm out of luck if I wanted any help. Even though we're only on move 6, either me or my opponent has already made moves that are no longer book moves, so we can exit out of that, and I just have to make my choice here. Another option you have on daily and correspondence games, which I highly recommend selecting, is here under Settings. There is a choice under Play and Daily to confirm move. Now, if you have that option selected, when you make a move on the board, you'll get a dialog box pop up over at the right that allows you to confirm that move. That way you won't lose a game due to a misclick or a mouse slip that you've spent weeks investing your time in. Let's cancel out of there because you can see that I've already selected it. Here, I don't know if I should take this pawn or if I should advance this pawn. I think if I advance this pawn, they'll take. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take this pawn on d5. And you probably won't be able to see it behind my camera view, but once I take that pawn, there is a box that pops up to the right. There's an X. If I click the X, my move will revert. But if I click the green checkbox, then my move is in the move list now, and now it's my opponent's turn. You might have seen the clocks change. My opponent now has 3 days to make their next move. Going over to the left again, it looks like I've got a new game that just popped up. That's the challenge I just created. Let's go there. I got the white pieces in this game, so I can make my first move and click the checkbox. Now, if you want to get to other daily games that are not listed there because your opponent hasn't moved yet, there's 2 ways. One is to go back to the home page where you saw the list of games. The other is over here on the right column. You can click on Games up at the top and then make sure to select Daily. And here in the right column, it will list all your ongoing daily games. You can choose to see them either in list form like this or in a block form like this where it shows a little image of each game. And you can scroll down through those to see which ones you have ongoing. Or as I said, you can go back to the homepage, chess.com, and scroll here and you have a list of all the daily games that you have ongoing. The ones that are highlighted are the ones in which your opponent has moved and they're waiting on you to move. Well, now let's switch over to Lichess and see how to do it over there. All right, this is the homepage on Lichess where you have the quick pairing section where you can choose bullet games, blitz games, rapid games, or classical time controls. Just above that are several tabs. One is the lobby, which I almost never use. This is where people have sent outgoing challenges, and you can just choose one of those, click on them, and be in one of those games. Another tab is correspondence. Right here are 2 outgoing challenges for correspondence games and a big blue button that says Create a Game, which I can click right now and choose one. And just to the right of the Correspondence tab is a tab that says 5 games in play. Now, if you don't have any correspondence games in play at the moment, that tab won't be there. But if I click on that, it will show the 5 correspondence games that I currently have ongoing on Lichess. And the little 2 says that 2 of them are waiting on me to move. But let's click back to the Correspondence tab and click Create a Game. When you click that, you get this pop-up. You can choose your variant, which I always choose standard, but the other choices include that pop-up box didn't show up for you, did it? There's other choices like Chess 960, Crazy House, King of the Hill, and so on, but I always choose standard. Under time control, there's correspondence, unlimited, or real time. Well, if we're looking for a correspondence game, we want to choose correspondence. And here's the slider I mentioned, where you can choose how many days per turn. Down to 1, all the way up to 14. And again, I usually choose 2 or 3 days. Now, I check every day on both sites, so 1 day would be fine for me, but again, I usually choose 2 or 3 days for my opponent's sake. You can choose whether they're casual or rated. I usually choose rated, but if you're sending me a challenge, please choose unrated or casual, because your skill level and my skill level might not be the same, and I think it would be much more fair to both of us if we played casual games with each other. But this is for an outgoing challenge into the random pool of Lichess. I'm going to select a rating range of -200 points to +200 points, and then I get to choose my color here. I can choose the black pieces, the white pieces, or random. I'm going to choose random, and it took me straight to the game. Sometimes it doesn't take me straight to the game. Sometimes it takes me back to that list, and my game is still listed there. But apparently someone had an outgoing challenge that matched mine. It looks like they're rated 1914, which is 120-something points higher than me. I'm still going to play e4, and here behind my camera view is the confirm move option. So I'm going to click accept, and now my move is on the board. Now, just as with the other site, here on Lichess, you can use the opening book. Here you get to it by clicking this microscope-looking icon underneath the opponent's rating. That takes you to an analysis board where you can make moves for both your opponent and yourself, or you can click a little book icon down here. You can see part of that, but this is the Lichess database. You can use that opening book, or you can use the Masters database and see if my opponent plays c5, knight to f3 and knight to c3 are the moves that I would want to play. But my opponent hasn't made that move yet. So let's go back to the home page. Now here it says 6 games in play, so I would click on that. And one thing that's different between daily or correspondence games versus real-time live games is conditional pre-moves. If you're used to playing bullet and blitz or even rapid, sometimes you'll make a pre-move where you know your opponent's going to take your piece, so you go ahead and pre-move the taking back of that piece in order to save time. In daily and correspondence games, you're not quite so worried about the clock, but there are times in which you would want to make pre-moves. For example, I'll choose one of these games where my opponent hasn't moved yet. In this game, my opponent has several possible next moves, and I don't know what they are, but I can select what's called conditional pre-moves just in case they make any of those moves. Again, we click the little microscope icon, and instead of going to the opening book, which we don't really need, it does say, by the way, in the opening book that the most common move here is for them to take back with this pawn. Let's say my opponent does that. I can go ahead and move that here, and then I can move my knight taking that pawn. And you'll notice at the upper left, it says conditional pre-moves, add current variation. So if I want to add that, I can go ahead and click this plus button, and so that move will be stored in the system. I can even take it a step further. If my opponent wants to take back with the knight, I'll take back with the queen. And now all of those moves are listed in that variation. And I'll click the plus button, and now that's added. And then you can click back to the game, and this is the current state of the game. So now, if my opponent shows up and see that I've pushed forward my d-pawn, if they take it, which is the most common move, I'll take back with my knight. Then if they take with their knight, I'll take back with my queen. And it'll happen instantly from their end, and I won't even have to be here for that to happen. Now, if I suspected that they might make a different move, I can go back and add more conditional pre-moves depending on what I think they might play. I don't know if there's a limit for that. It might be 5. And I also don't know if there's a limit for how long of a string you can make. If there's a long, say, series of forced moves during a checkmating sequence or something like that. I have, on more than one occasion, used conditional pre-moves in daily and correspondence games to win when I wasn't even there. In fact, once I was recording a video on one of these sites when I got the notification that I had won a game by checkmate using my conditional pre-moves. My opponent had moved, and then my piece moved instantly while I was doing something else entirely on the website. Let me take you back over to chess.com and show you the conditional pre-moves over there. Now here again on chess.com, we are on the home page where it's showing my list of 7 ongoing daily games. I'm just going to choose this one here. This is the current state of this game. I have just taken my opponent's bishop here. Now here behind my camera view, there is a button that looks like 2 arrows separating from one another. And if you hover over it, it will say conditional moves. You click that. It changes your right tab to predict opponent's next move. and the title says Conditional Moves. Now, one difference on Chess.com is once you put the moves in this list, they're already stored. There's no button to click Add. So if you're in the middle of concocting a long line of conditional pre-moves and your opponent comes back and makes their move, your next move will happen even before you've finished your line. So you have to be careful about what you add here. But I want to just show you how it's done. So let's say my opponent does something like moves their h-pawn, which seems like it might be a common move in this position. So they play h3, threatening my bishop. Now I have a couple of choices here. I could take this knight, I could drop my bishop back and come back this way, which is, I think, what I want to do. So I'm going to drop my bishop back. And you can see that those two moves have been added here under line 1, h3 and bishop to h5. And now, of course, if they play g5, I will drop my bishop back to g6, where it will be pointed at their queen and protected by 2 pawns. But that is added. If you want to get rid of that, there is, of course, a little X off to the right. You click that, that line will disappear. To get out of this screen, you can click the X or click the green button that's not visible to you right now, but on the website it would be down at the lower right, and it takes you back to the current status of the game board. But there's a little red asterisk down there on that button showing that you do have conditional pre-moves waiting in the wings. Now again, I don't always use those. I usually only use those in capture-capture situations where I've captured an opponent's piece and I know that they're going to take back, so I can go ahead and plan my next move, or in forced move situations where I'm checking them or they're checking me and there's a pretty obvious continuation. Now sometimes that can be intimidating. When you make a move and the other move happens instantly, that lets you know that the opponent has put a conditional pre-move in the system. So I do sometimes use it near the end of games as a kind of an intimidation factor, and very often my opponents see that happen and they'll go ahead and resign because they think I've found a forced mating sequence. And sometimes I have, but sometimes I'm just making what would be the obvious next move to save time. Now, during the course of this video, I have mentioned a few differences between the two sites and how they handle these things, like the differences in the way that they handle pre-moves, the difference between the opening books. On Lichess, you can also check the player's database for opening book. You can also check on both sites. You can use a physical book, like Modern Chess Openings, which I have in there on my shelf, but what you can't do is check an engine. But another difference between the two sites is on Chess.com, there are daily tournaments. Now, if you go over to the right and hover over the play button, the part of the menu is tournaments, so let's click on that. Now there is a list of upcoming live tournaments, but there's also a list of upcoming daily tournaments. Let's click on that. Now here you'll see a bunch of tournaments that are coming up, and there are all sorts of options. Now I've participated in dozens, maybe even 100 of these, including some official ones put on by the website. For example, the one at the top is the 68th Chess.com tournament for the 1200 to 1399 rating range. Well, I think I want to enter that. I'm going to click on that one. Now there are several options here. For example, it tells you the time control. There's 3 days in this one, no vacation. I think I mentioned earlier that you can take vacation days either automated or intentionally so that you don't time out when you have to be away for whatever reason. But on the tournaments, the tournament director can decide whether or not vacation is even allowed in these tournaments. And in this one, it's not allowed. I like those. Sometimes players will abuse the vacation option and go on vacation as long as they can, hoping that their opponent will eventually get tired of the game. It tells you right here whether or not the games are going to be rated, what the rating range for this tournament is. I'm well within this rating range. Now, in a tournament, if you end up with dozens or hundreds, or in this case, over 1,000 players, they will be divided into groups. In this case, the maximum group size is going to be 6, and only 1 player will advance from each group. And since you're going to be one of 6 in a group, that means you're going to be playing 5 other people at one time. So you will have 10 simultaneous games. You're going to be playing each opponent as white and as black at the same time. And there are a bunch of other options here set by the tournament director. I'm going to go ahead and click join. And it says, this is a no vacation tournament. Are you sure you want to join? Well, I am, because I have joined tournaments that allow vacation, and those usually last forever. It's very irritating. I like the no vacation tournaments, so I will click the join confirm, and it says you have been registered for this tournament. Now you can scroll down and see a list of other players who have registered. Some of them are outside their rating range. This person is rated 1590. Well, I can tell you from experience that when the tournament starts, all those people who are rated above the max rating range, they will automatically be knocked out of the tournament. They won't be participating, so you don't have to worry about that. That's one of the differences between the two websites, and one reason that I play most of my daily games over on chess.com is because of these tournaments. So anyway, I hope for those of you who were curious about daily and correspondence games on these two sites that this has helped satisfy your curiosity. Some other things I forgot to mention are all of this is available in the apps, both for chess.com and Lichess. When you open the app on your phone or your tablet, you can go right to your list of daily games and make your moves. There's also the confirm move setting and the opening book are available in the apps. And that's where I play most of my moves. Because as I said, very often I don't have the time to do a full game, but I might have time, 2 minutes, to open the app, see which games my opponent has made a move in, open that game, and see if I'm ready to make a move. Sometimes I know right off the bat, if it's during the opening stage, what my move is going to be. Other times I might want to consider the position. I take as long as I can and make my move. And if I'm not ready to decide yet, I can just swipe to the next game or close the app and come back later, as long as I'm within my time control. Another thing I failed to mention is one of the reasons I like playing these is because they keep me coming back to the site. They're habit forming in the sense that you have an obligation to come back and make your move if your opponent has moved. If you're only playing live games like Rapid, Blitz, and Bullet, you can play 20 of those in one day, but then you can go days without coming back to the site. And I like to have a good habit of learning, a good habit of instruction, a good habit of practice and education, and have chess going through my brain every single day. And the fact that I have daily and correspondence games waiting on my moves keeps me coming back to the site every day, and that's one reason that I have been on both Chess.com and Lichess every day for the past 2 or more years, is because I constantly have one of these games waiting for me. And sometimes I've had more than 20 of them going on at once. I know other players that have over 100 daily games going on at a time. So if you're looking for the kind of game where you can spend several minutes considering each move in every position, coming up with candidate moves, looking for blunder checks, going through your checks, captures, and threats checklist, but you don't have time to play longer rapid games or even classical time controls, maybe daily and correspondence games would be something for you. And of course, because you can use the opening book, it's a good way to practice openings. I hope this was informative. Thank you for spending time on my channel, and I'll see you next time.